Often I wonder why I must journey over a road so rugged and steep, while there are others living in comfort, while with the lost I labor and weep.
From the moment of their first arrival in Canada, Black women, our foremothers, have been the backbone of our communities. They've taken in washing and ironing, worked in service, raised their own children and those of others. They have farmed land, worked in factories, taught schools, and worked in the church and community. Because of the color of their skin, and because they were women, the rich record of their lives has been hidden from us. Here, then, are the lives of 5 women today, 5 portraits of commitment and struggle. It's the 40th anniversary of Coach Dolores Shadd's basketball team, the Red Dragons.
Back in the early 40s, after high school, I decided I wanted to be a nurse. I wanted to join the Cadet Corps. I found that the only place a colored person could go would be in the southern part of the United States, so I decided against it.
Born in Dresden, Ontario, Dolores went to school in Detroit while coaching young women at a community center.
I had the 5 basketball teams. The Chinese team, the Red Dragons. I had a Mexican Spitfire team, Jiving Jills, the Hot Shots, and one other team.
Dolores and the Red Dragons withstood the color bar, their friendship given strength by overcoming injustice. For this reunion, they've come from as far as Hawaii.
In 40 years, we'll all come with our children pushing our wheelchairs.
If we're here, let's make it sound like
You're optimistic.
For the last 30 years, Dolores Shadd has been a farmer, working the land first tilled by early Black settlers. She and her husband Ed live on their farm near Chatham in southwestern Ontario. Today, Dolores sits on the board of the National Farmers Union. She travels across the country and the world on behalf of farmers. But all this came long after her first attempts at farming.
When I first got married, we had a few chickens, and Ed said, well, you know, my mother used to raise chickens, that was their spending money. Well, I liked chickens, and I tried it, and I soon found out, well, at first I broke more eggs than I took to market because I was a little rough, and they were cracking and breaking my hand. I had all kinds of problems until I learned how to handle the eggs maybe more gently. But I discovered that I was robbing Peter to pay Paul. Time I bought laying mash and shells and etc., I wasn't making any money, so the chickens went. It is a good profession if you like growing things, like being outside, and I think it's the only profession in which Dad and Mom are always present. The children can look out across the field and see Dad out there.
Dolores also remembers the closeness of the Black farming community in the old days and the camaraderie of the women.
You didn't have money to pay 5 or 6 or 7 men to bring a team of horses in their wagon, so you shared. And then there'd be agreement that that thrash machine would do all the thrashing for all the farmers on that particular road. And then the women of that area would come and help the farm wife with the cooking. Then 2 or 3 days later, you went to the next farm. And then I remember when something called a combine came out. And that meant that was the end of that particular era. There was no more thrashing machines, the excitement of farm women working together, getting big meals, and maybe taking 2 or 3 days on your farm. It now meant that one person would operate the combine, and you need someone else maybe to drive the wagons away or to load it into a bin. And this cut down on the amount of work and the big meals that the farm women had to get. And yet I think we missed that togetherness and sharing.
Woman director of her farm district, Dolores is passionate about the concerns of farmers locally and worldwide.
One of the things is the low prices that we get, and we've often discussed it as farm women. What would happen if we farm women drove that tractor to the mill and said, we must have $8. If we don't get it, we leave. And one of the things I find that farmers are resentful is the multinationals using our food as a weapon against third world countries. It's a food dollar shortage because they don't have the money to buy the food. If we ourselves could distribute our food and not let the multinationals use it, we could wipe the famine off the earth in about 2 days. There would be no need for anyone to starve.
I hollered and they wouldn't move till Down come out and rattled the chain, and then they took off and nearly threw me off of the binder.
These farm women, younger and older, are descendants of women who fled the tyranny of slavery to hew a freedom out of Ontario farmland.
That's right. You hesitate to even hope that one of your children will want to farm because you know they can't make it. And according to the government, it takes 400 acres for about 4 people, and most of us have less than that to live on.
It's a good feeling until you get to the mill and they don't give you enough for your crops to pay the cost of production. And it's nice for the young people now, they have tractors. When I started was in the dirty 30s and I had to drive a team of horses.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, it
You
goes.
sell your eggs for 35 cents a dozen and then go in the store and buy them for $1.50 a dozen.
Yeah.
You know darn well it isn't the farmers getting it.
Yeah.
I used to get in more arguments at work with our chef. He always talking about rich farmers.
Yeah, I get tired
And
of
I
that.
told him they're not rich. Well, they're driving big cars and they got all the machinery. I said the bank just lets them drive those cars and use that machinery.
Right.
Yeah.
Born in Manitoba, Grace Fowler, like most black women of her time, has worked since her early teens.
Well, when I was 14, I was 14 in December. In January, I got a job working for this man. I was working for board and room and clothes. They fed me real good. And I did everything. I fed horses, curried horses, slopped hogs, milked cows, cleaned barns, cut wood, worked in the house, you know, washed. I was a farm help, and because I was a girl, I did both jobs. This was near Beausejour. That's about 50 miles out of Winnipeg, and it was pretty rough going. See, this is back in Depression time I'm talking about.
After working as a busgirl in Winnipeg in the 30s, when black women were refused work as waitresses, Grace moved to Toronto in 1944. The war signaled the first time that black women in Canada were allowed employment in factories.
So I got a job in the war plant. I worked on what they call the high explosive site, where you got paid a little extra because you were working with dangerous powders. We made detonators for torpedoes. And it wasn't a bad job. I learned every job on the line because it was awful boring just to stay in one. Some of the women stayed in one job all the time they were there, but I made the rounds, learned them all. I know there's prejudice all over Canada, but I never ran into prejudice in Winnipeg like I did in Toronto. And I remember one time I had just come back to work. I took a week off trying to find another place to live. And I had been knocking on doors, having the door slammed in my face. One day after we'd been out all day long, I got on the streetcar right at 5 o'clock, you know, when everybody's getting off work, hanging on a strap. Tired, I'm frustrated, I'm angry, and then some clown in the back of the streetcar said, "That's the first time I saw a nigger with freckles." I was going down there and snatch somebody, but my husband said, "Just ignore them, they're all ignorant."
After the war, Grace and her husband began farming and raised 4 children just outside of Buxton.
Once a year, we got a babysitter so we could go to the Labor Day dance. Other than that, you took your kids with you. Like they used to have square dances down in Buxton, you took the kids. When they got bigger, they square danced. When they were babies, you stayed home because you didn't have time to didn't have the energy to go to dances. And basically you didn't have the money. Because, you know, railroad men, until A. Philip Randolph come in and organized them, used to only get $80 a month. I always fight for the underdog. I was the only scrapper in our family. Like, if somebody was pushing my brothers and sisters around, well, then I would take up for them. And I've been doing that for the rest of my life.
To struggle for the underdog is a lesson history teaches all black women. It led Grace to become a union activist and president of the Kent County NDP.
The working man needs all the help he can get because he's carrying this country on his back. Rich man's got all kind of loopholes, and they are also for the people that are on a fixed income. Because right now I pay almost as much income tax as I did when I was working. And to me, that doesn't seem fair when I've paid the income tax since 1939. You'd think right by now I'd paid my dues.
Once in a while, Grace comes here to this land invested with much of her labor, much of her life. Through the ceremony of toil, the indignities of race, for all of us, the black church was refuge, home. The first woman to be ordained in the British Methodist Episcopal Church, Reverend Addie Ailstock, served this same Buxton community for 8 years. Today, she has come back for a special service.
The first ministry I had was on sound. I was already there as a deaconess. And I was there for another 2 years, and then I was appointed to North Buxton. They graciously accepted me. When I first came, I said the salary wasn't very much, because the farmers weren't getting very much for their produce then. They were very good at seeing, of course, that I was taken care of, because they bring me chickens and the meat from the pigs and the cows.
There I'll see my Savior's face and enjoy unboundless grace, standing on the word of Jesus till he came.
It surely is a delightful experience for me to be here at this service. After pastoring here for quite a number of years and then going away, and be able to return, as it seems like home. You that attended the services when I pastored here, and since then, no doubt at different meetings, you have heard me quote quite frequently, "He is able to do exceeding abundantly above all that we can ask or think, according to the power that worketh in us." I often quoted that, feeling that that was a special verse that the Lord had given me, of course, quite a number of years ago.
Reverend Ailstock received the spiritual call when she was 9 years old.
I didn't feel any different to begin with, but afterwards I started reading the Bible, and I felt that really the Lord had come in my heart. I felt the peace within.
At 18, she joined the BME Church in Toronto, committing her life to giving out the Word of God. Soon after, she became a deaconess, traveling, doing missionary work in black communities in Montreal and Africville, Halifax.
When the resolution was put at the conference to ordain women, there was a little opposition then, but the majority were in favor. But I never had any difficulty in any of the churches because I was a woman.
Only the second woman minister in Canadian history, those pioneering days tested her resolve.
I had never lived alone in a house before. And when I came to North Buxton, I remember it was a Saturday, and my cousin came and helped me to clean up the parsonage, which is across the road from the church. And then I began to wonder, how am I going to stay here all night by myself? And I thought of asking her to stay, or could I go into her place? I said, no, I'm going to just ask the Lord to take care of me now. I'm going to start right off.
A woman at the center of her church and her community, Reverend Ailstock's singular mission has been to do the spiritual work which has been so healing to her people.
I was dedicated to the Lord. I felt I had plenty of opportunities to get married, but I felt I really couldn't do justice to the Lord's work. And so I had plenty of opportunities, but I felt that the Lord wanted me to continue on as I am. And I'm still happy. I have tried to retire several times, but it seems like it isn't the Lord's will, and I'll continue on doing what I can for Him.
Bathurst Street, the heart of the largest black community in Canada. Gwen Johnson. Her family dates the 1860s in Toronto. She and Lenny Johnson, her husband, run the Third World Bookstore, begun with their small savings 20 years ago. In the Toronto of her childhood, Gwen knew that our people's past was missing.
When we were going to school here in Canada, there was nothing. We didn't come across any black books until we were in our late teens, early 20s, really.
It was at the height of the Black Power movement that Gwen and Lenny first opened their store. The fight for civil rights and African liberation spread internationally, gripping the growing black community of Toronto.
The 60s was a very exciting time for black people. The store was always full of people looking for information. They came to get books for themselves and for their children. And people brought newspapers, community newspapers and flyers to be distributed. We had a wonderful time at Third World. Good morning. How are you?
Good afternoon. I'm very well.
Blessed.
How are you doing?
Very, very well, thank you. So
Gwen Johnson comes from a long line of women who faced the hardships of being black in Canada.
That's nice. My grandmother's name was Rosetta Amos. And then when she married, she was Rosetta Amos Richardson. She raised a family of 7 children, but she wasn't a person ever to complain about life's situation. She just went at it and did what she could.
For her great-grandmother, her grandmother, her mother, for Gwen, and most black women in those days, domestic work was the only work available. And for them, labor outside the home was a necessity.
There was very little money at home, so I just quit school and went to work. I started working, I guess about at age 15. And luckily, I did have fairly good people to work for. My mother was very fussy about who I would go to work for. She told me a lot of things to watch for, and people who she felt would take advantage, she'd say, no, don't take that job. So I did have some places that were quite nice, some families that had small children, and I looked after the children. But I did everything else too, the cooking, and they did have usually somebody to come in and do the heavy cleaning. $25 a month was considered a fairly good wage. Before that, you sort of had to work up to $25 a month. Before that, it was even less. Also, the women who went out and worked by the day, they earned $1 a day and car fare. Sometimes they were given their lunch, sometimes they weren't. And they worked very hard. They would be expected to come in and clean a whole house in some cases in a day for $1 a day. Can you imagine that? Very, very, very hard work. You'll enjoy this book. Malcolm X was a great man.
Gwen is determined that our culture will not be lost again. She and Lenny provide today's black children with books about their history.
We feel that we have introduced our people to a lot of marvelous reading. And it's very important that our children, our young people, be introduced to their history and culture, which was lost to us for so long.
I grew up in a small community, and my grandparents and my parents were always involved both in the church, in the community, and in the school. And it became a part of my lifestyle. So when I came to Canada, I became involved with the church and the community.
If labor outside the home took the measure of these women's lives, leadership in the community was imperative. Eva Smith came to Canada in 1955 on the West Indian Domestic Workers Scheme. Many black women were recruited through this scheme to work in white Canadian households.
The salary was, for most people, were $60 a month, $15 a week. And there were people who, you had to be up, although you live in the same house, when the employer, husband and wife gone out, and you're babysitting, if it is until 6 o'clock in the morning, you better be sitting up when they arrive. And you must be up also at 7 o'clock to get breakfast. And so those were some of the things. People weren't getting proper time off. There was no one to speak up for them.
You know, people had their passports taken away from them, their clothing taken away, and they couldn't go out unless they went out with the employer.
Yes.
You know, things like shoveling snow and a little sweater and sandals and all.
Still they came, out of need and circumstance, and this is where Eva's community organizing began.
Giving them that kind of information.
The most precious part of any black community is its children, and Eva's vision of community had deepened through those early years of isolation. Still working at a full-time job, she began teaching black heritage.
I can recall many nights I would get home from Jane Finch. I'd reach here by, say, 10:30, get a cup of coffee, and be out to work. Some mornings I would get home and be out there like on a Saturday morning and be out there for that program. Yonge Street was really, say, half of the journey. And many times I would say to myself, woman, you got to be crazy. Where are you going in this weather? But when I arrived there and see all these kids standing outside, I was very glad that I did go. Because most of the kids, they are from the islands where they're not accustomed to apartment living. And so other than that, they would be hanging around in the corridor or in the plaza where they would get involved with the police. So that Saturday morning program was an outlet for them, a place where they could go and feel at ease. Long, long ago, a rabbit lived on a bluff overlooking a lake. A path went by her door and down the bank of the water. Come out at once. She banged on the door. Bang, bang, bang. But the bad animal said more crossly than before, go away, or I will trample on you. And the rabbit sat down on a nearby log to think. What do you think about what's going on in this?
Believing that education would free black people from the bonds of inequality, it is 20 years since those first classes, and Eva is still working, still teaching. Tonight is the Eva Smith Bursary Awards. This is a tribute to her vigilance and a gift of love from the young people whom she has taught.
She is dedicated to the advancement of our community.
So rarely honored for their commitment and struggle, black women like Eva, Gwen, Addie, Grace, and Dolores shape a legacy for us all to carry.
So, why not? On behalf of all of us here and your friends, please accept this as a token of our appreciation for your commitment, and your hard work. We are expecting great things of you.
Thank you very much.
There was a rule in my family. What hurt one of us, hurt all of us. And that attitude I have taken with me, and I have helped the kids to understand. Even sometimes I remember students who are at advanced level. There's always a feeling that, well, I'm not a part of those kids. And I always say to them, when you walk down the corridor, the first thing that comes to someone's mind, you are a black child. They don't stop to ask whether you are in advance, whether you're from Jamaica, whether you're from Trinidad, or where, or you're a Canadian. You are all in the same boat. Therefore, what hurt one of us, hurt all of us.
Mm.